I very much recognise the concerns that she set out in relation to... Well, I agree with her that early years is a vital part of the education system, and it's precisely why we've been consulting on how to make sure we can have a sensible approach on funding for early years. But I disagree with her characterisation of us cutting funding. That's simply not correct. I was very clear in my Conservative Party conference. Well, he quite rightly raises his concerns to make sure that the young people... I can assure him that I'm very conscious of the particular challenges that rural schools face, and in fact...
Sure we get this right. In fact, there are two people who are prominent within the Every Lever Matters campaign who are working with us to design the system that we want to create in the future.
Received.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can assure my honourable friend that the Department is monitoring closely the rate of conversions from statements. I think my honourable friend makes an excellent point, and one of the reasons why we want to hold local areas to account is to make sure that they don't just...
Well, my honourable friend, who I know is a champion of apprenticeships in his area.
Well, in May, Mr. Speaker, the government set out a package of measures to secure the...
Lillian Greenwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Schools in urban areas also face challenges, with many reporting huge...
And in response to that, in 2014, the previous Secretary of State announced the workload challenge. There were 44,000 responses to that highlighted issues like dialogic marking, data collection. We set up review groups to look at that. They have reported, we've accepted their recommendations, and now we're acting on those recommendations to ease the burden of workload of teachers in our schools. We're acting, and we have acted.
How?
Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the Minister's comments today about rural schools, and I do have a large preponderance of rural schools in my constituency of Taunton Deane, but the fact is the pupils in Taunton Deane receive £2,000 less per pupil on average than the national average, and I know the Secretary of State and the Minister is working hard in the best interests of our young people, our teachers and our governors, but please could you confirm that due consideration will be given to righting the disparity between our schools and our pupils in terms of funding?
Well, we have protected the core schools budget in real terms, but the system for distributing the formula in the spring of this year, and that will include sparsity as a concept and also a fixed cost for the Royal College of Teaching, and it's going to be a great success. I should point out to the honourable member, of course, that 95% of all teachers in our system have qualified teacher status. 93% of all teachers in academies have QTS.
Donnellan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have an annual shortage of 69,000 trained engineers in the UK, with 6% of the workforce being only female. Much more severe shortages than we're seeing in computer science. As the Minister pointed out, the new Design and Technology GCSE does have the same academic rigour as the other subjects in EBAC. So can the Minister please explain to the House why he felt that computer science was more worthy of the EBAC status than design and technology?
Well, the EBAC is about a small number of Wolf Review did in 2011, removing from the performance tables qualifications that students were being entered that were not valued in the workplace. Now, those technical qualifications taken by young people have real value, and they do provide proper jobs. We've also improved the quality of the apprenticeship scheme that my honourable friend has been talking about earlier. Small enough at either 7 or 8 GCSEs to allow sufficient time in the curriculum to study those subjects that interest particular pupils. And that's why I have resisted calls for more subjects to be added to the EBAC.
Well, my honourable friend is exactly right, and technical education clearly needs to be aligned better with business needs. So we're building on the apprenticeship reforms, where employers are designing the new apprentice standards to meet their needs. We're giving employers a strong role in setting the standards across the 15 technical routes. They will advise on the knowledge, the skills and behaviours needed so that technical education has value for employers and learners alike and is responsive to the requirements of the economy and employers.
Mr. Speaker, can I first of all congratulate East Sussex Council on its Ofsted rating, and I agree we want others to learn from the best. And the development of regional adoption agencies will see local authorities and voluntary adoption agencies working side by side to deliver excellent adoption services everywhere, with a strong focus on evidencing what actually works. And so we're also setting up the new aptly titled What Works Centre for children's social care, which will disseminate and promote best practice across the country.
Play key roles in our children's education, be that as classroom assistants, teachers, janitors, cleaners. But we cannot underestimate how morale is affected by the xenophobic rhetoric such as we heard last week at the Tory party conference. Does the Minister agree it is time to do the right thing and give a solid guarantee that EU nationals can remain to contribute to our children's education?
Secretary of State clearly doesn't wish to be outdone by her honourable friend, the Minister of State. I think that much is clear. Alison Mathulis.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I welcome the Secretary of State to her place. The reputation of Scotland's higher education sector is of huge significance at home and in the wider world. What assessment has the Secretary of State made of the damage which could be caused to that reputation by the marketisation of the HE sector, opening up to unknown and disreputable new providers?
Of course, that's not at all what the bill is seeking to do, and indeed what it's...
Gordon Henderson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Would my right honourable friend join with me in congratulating Philip Siddiq?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'd like to come back to a point made by my honourable friend from Manchester Centre.
The current government's funding formula. Will the Minister meet with me to share how we can avert a crisis and ensure every 3- and 4-year-old in Twickenham will be able to get 30 hours free childcare?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Yes, we recognise that the costs of providing childcare vary enormously across different...
Too many local authorities who are not yet bringing forward new-style local development plans at all. And unless the neighbourhood plan...
and certainly clauses 9 to 30 look as if they'll make the eye-watering complexity of some aspects of the compulsory purchase system somewhat easier to navigate and hopefully will...
enter into the local supply chain and nobody else, and that is not right. And I would urge the Minister, get tough with the developers. We want to build houses affordable and to buy, and it should not be down for the developers to dictate planning policy and to tell us ultimately what is going to happen. We are the government, we decide, and it's on this side. We will support the government, provided we see government doing everything we can to get...
William Wright.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased to be able to speak in the second reading of this bill and broadly welcome it this evening. I support the main aims of the bill and to make the housing market work better for everybody, to help identify and free up more land to build homes. Now, to solve the housing shortage, there is no magic wand, and it will require many years of investment, hard work and difficult choices. And while government plays a role, ultimately the work is done by those building houses, the developers. Mr Deputy Speaker, whilst many aspects of the bill are welcome, it's also to consider... I will give way at that point, certainly.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I ask the honourable gentleman this question. In Northern Ireland, we have a planning system that enables social housing to be set aside in each new development for private housing.
Harperley, all of whom developers are desperate to develop in, and it is vital that those communities...
In those circumstances, would it not be appropriate to give full protection for a neighbourhood that is delivering on those numbers within the overall context of that local? And there's a number of ways we could do that. One of the frustrations I have in my constituency is one of my local authorities concentrates all their housing into large allocated sites.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for giving way. He mentioned sustainable communities in planning. Would he agree with Dame Alice Hudson, the head teacher of Twyford?
And the other point which I would also make is that we need to make sure that we have good quality design. In my constituency, I have a lot of new build, which is subject to the party opposite when they were in power.
Cheers, Newpost, and I look forward to working with them in committee and improving this bill. We strongly welcome
colleagues from the government benches contributing. My right honourable friend for West Dorset and my honourable friends for Congleton, Milton Keynes South and Cotswold got, I think, to the heart of the matter, which is the interaction between neighbourhood plans and local plans, and in particular the issue of the 5-year land supply. And I think this is an issue we will want to come back on as we go through the bill. There is a tension here, which we should be honest about, which is on the one hand, clearly we can't expect our constituents to put a huge amount of work into these plans if they don't hold weight in certain situations. Meeting housing need in that area Any member of this House who cares as passionately as we do about making sure that we build the homes this country needs can't allow a situation to persist for years and years where that need isn't being met. So there is a difficult issue here, and I thought my honourable friend's suggestion of a mixture of stick and carrots is actually also through policy changes. So I'm very conscious of what the problem is, and I'm sure we can work together as we go through this bill to find a solution. Housing. But where I can't agree with them is we're not building enough housing in this country. So we need more housing, but the infrastructure must go with it. My honourable friend for Pudsey, who is such a fantastic advocate for his constituent sites. And finally, on our side of the House, my honourable friend for Plymouth, Sutton and Devonport made the absolutely critical point that it is about quality as well as quantity, and that if we build beautiful buildings, it will encourage communities to go for growth. Turning just very briefly, Mr Speaker, to the opposition. There's no doubting the passion of Labour members in terms of addressing our housing problems, but there were several things that were said this evening which shows that sometimes their policy prescriptions don't match that ambition. So we heard in relation to permitted development, and I entirely understand the concerns, but it is worth putting on record that we have had over 11,000 permitted development applications. We don't know the number of homes, that's the data we want. Planning conditions. And the Honourable Lady, the Shadow Secretary of State, asked for some data. Well, I've had some time to dig some out. A survey of small and medium-sized builders carried out by the National House Building Council. The study reported that 34% were concerned about the time. In conclusion, Mr Speaker, last week the Secretary of State set out the first step in our plan to get this country building the homes it desperately needs. This bill is the second step. We entirely accept it is not on its own a solution to the problem, and later in the autumn we will be publishing a white paper. But the fact, Mr Speaker, is that for years and years and years we have not been building enough home in this country, and the consequences in terms of young people's ability to get on the housing ladder have been dramatic. If you are 45, 50% of 45-year-olds owned their own home by the time they were 30. If you're 35 years old, only 35% owned their own home by the time they were 30. And if you're 25 years old today, the projection is just 26% will own their own home by the time they're 30. This government is determined to build a country that works for everyone, and critical to that is building a housing market that works for everyone. And this bill is an important step in a wider plan to deliver that critical ambition for the future of this country. And with that, I beg to move.
I beg to move this House to now adjourn.
Thank you. The question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I am very grateful to you for selecting me to produce and speak on this motion this evening, some 13 months over the first time I raised it. And whilst I accept, as the Minister will know, this only affects a relatively small number of children,